Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Danny Welsh and I'm an ecologist and biogeochemist, and I'm here to talk about communities and ecosystems. Now, a community is all of the species that exist together in a single environment. This is a nurse log that we would typically see in a wet forest environment, and all of the species occupying this log, including the trees, the mosses, the fungi, the worms, are part of that community. Now, one of the really neat things about communities is that the organisms tend to evolve together, and this is a concept known as coevolution. In coevolution, in this case, the caribou are being chased by the wolves. The wolves are going to catch the slowest caribou first, so those guys are going to be taken out of the gene pool. They're not going to be able to reproduce. So the caribou are going to get gradually faster from a genetic perspective as the wolves take down the slower caribou. Now, at the same time, the wolves are going to get faster because the fastest wolves are going to be the ones that catch the caribou and are able to eat. The slowest wolves are the ones that aren't going to be able to eat and thus reproduce. So that's a great example of coevolution. Now, if we take all of the communities, such as we see over here on the left, all of the organisms that exist in a particular location, and we combine that with the physical environment, in this case the geology and the atmosphere, then we get an ecosystem. So an ecosystem is the biological plus the physical. That's the difference between a community and an ecosystem. Now, one of the neat things about ecosystems is this concept of succession. Basically, what that means is that ecosystems are striving to reach what's considered a climax condition. So in this case, that climax condition would be a climax forest, a very high tree. So if you started with bare rock, eventually you would get some biological material that would start to grow there, and it would transition over through time into this high tree climax forest. Now, the organisms that are in ecosystems actually interact in very unique and specific ways. The first is competition. Here we've got the green anole and the brown anole. The green anole is native, the brown anole is invasive, but they occupy the same space, the same ecosystem. So now, because you've got two species in the same space that are competing together, both species are in decline. The most common is predation. You've got one species doing well, in this case the lion here, and in another case, or the other species, the prey is in decline. Parasitism has a similar relationship. This is the tongue-eating louse that gets into a fish's mouth, eats its tongue, and then sits there as its tongue and eats the food that the fish takes in. So the parasite does well, the fish does poorly. We've got this unique relationship called commensalism. In commensalism, one organism is benefited, the other organism has no impact. So the cows are not impacted, but the cows stir up bugs that the egrets eat. So the egrets benefit, no change to the cows. And then the last one is mutualism. Neither organism can exist without the other, and the primary example there are insects or pollinators and flowers. Now, as we talk about the different roles that organisms play in ecosystems, we've got two primary types of organisms. We've got autotrophs, which make their own food, and we've got heterotrophs, which consume their food. One of the main differences is that autotrophs consume carbon dioxide. They take in carbon dioxide and convert it to food, whereas autotrophs, or heterotrophs, give off carbon dioxide. Now, all of these interactions result in energy and nutrients being cycled throughout ecosystems and throughout communities. It all starts with the sun. So we have our primary producers up here that are our autotrophs. The rabbit eats these autotrophs, and the rabbit both defecates and then dies, and that is transferring nutrients and energy into the soil. If we just focus on the energy for a second, one of the things that we see is that not everything is very efficient. Just sitting here living, if you did nothing else but sat on your couch all day and watched television, you would still give off heat to the environment through this process of cellular respiration. But communities also transfer energy through growth and reproduction, through death, through excretion, and through defecation, and these bubbles over here on the right are where that energy ultimately ends up. Now, everything in nature cycles. The big nutrient cycles are the carbon cycle, the water cycle, and the rock cycle. But within biogeochemistry and ecology, we've got the phosphorus cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and the carbon cycle. I've depicted the carbon cycle here because it's the one you might be the most familiar with because of global warming and climate change. And that's driven by these purple arrows over here on the right side. These are the ones that we've influenced. We're taking fuel, carbon, out of the ground and we're putting it into the atmosphere. Now the problem is that we're not putting it back into the ground at the same rate. This extraction arrow is larger than this injection arrow, indicating that we have a surplus of carbon that's ending up here in the atmosphere. So this is our Earth. All of the green parts of the Earth, all the parts of the Earth that are occupied by organisms are what we call the biosphere. These are all the ecosystems on Earth. And we can break these biospheres down into terrestrial ecosystems, like we have in this northern forest ecosystem. We have freshwater aquatic ecosystems, like in lakes and wetlands. And we have saltwater aquatic ecosystems, like we have in the Chesapeake Bay. Now, the last important concept in communities and ecology is this idea of primary productivity. This is basically a measure of an ecosystem's ability to take energy out of the atmosphere and from the sun and convert it into biomass. And you can see that this is basically in kilocalories per meter squared per day. Or kilocalories per meter squared per year, sorry. And you can see that estuaries, swamps, and marshes have the highest amount of this. Tropical rainforests have a little bit less, but then deserts down here where you have very little plant life that is responsible for doing this has very little. So that's it.